Segment 3, Gold and Black Live, joined by Cory Palm, Director of Broadcast Services, but becoming a renowned author. And we're going to have some fun talking about something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's Purdue football history, Purdue sports history. And that part of it is what Cory is doing on the side, as if he has a lot of time to do that as the Director of Broadcast Services. But the book is Perfect Warriors, and it's the story of the 1943 Purdue football team. And and as I've gone through it, Cory, really well done and well documented. My gosh, all your footnotes and everything are very well put together. And yet, that is an amazing story. And I want to ask you first, how did you get interested in that? Obviously, you've been in Purdue athletics for almost 20 years, so you began to know those stories. But what got you first and foremost interested in that?
Yeah, Alan, thanks for having me, first of all. Always great to talk about this and all things Boiler football. I came to Purdue in 2004 and started volunteering in the sports information office with athletics, and started doing small research projects. And over my time, and then through grad school, I stayed with the communications office. And I forget what year. It might have been 2007. I was working on some research, and Cory Sheets was closing in on a single season touchdown record. And
right.
I don't think he got it that year. He ended up getting it the next year. He ended up getting it, but I ran across the name Tony Butkovich in the record books from 1943.
Yeah.
And it struck me that this was a player on the list with Keys and Allstott and now Sheets, and I'd never heard of them. So I started looking into just that little nugget. Okay, it struck me, okay, this was during the war, so maybe that had something to do with it. Well, as you know, of course it did. And the more I started looking into Tony and learning more about that team, the more fascinating it became for me. It became a research project for grad school, and then just sort of honestly sat on a shelf for a while. I started writing a couple chapters, and then life got busy. But life slowed down quite a bit a couple years ago with the pandemic, and I found myself with a bunch of extra time and this research that I needed to do something with. So that's kind of how it became the book that it is now.
You look at that in the history, and of course the 1943 Purdue team, not a spoiler alert, but this was the number 5 ranked team, Purdue's last undefeated team, and finished 9-0. How they got there is a big part of the storyline here. But it was an amazing time, and we're not going to make a comparison between World War II and COVID, but that disruption that was part of that storyline that we experienced the last couple of years was such a big part of this storyline. By 1943, Purdue and the war effort was going hot and heavy. Purdue was getting an influx of not only students from other places, but athletes from other players. Explain the V12 program, the fact that Purdue got that influx of talent, certainly Alex Agassi, Tony Butkovich, Sam Picani on down the line, but it's an amazing and interesting sidelight to a time that was very, very challenging for a lot of people.
It really is, and it stands to common sense. It stands to reason once you start peeling back the layers and understanding. Okay, all this other country is at war, and there are now millions of new soldiers and sailors and Marines with a military that's not equipped to necessarily lead that many volunteers, which eventually became the draft and all of that. So the Army and the Navy were both kind of swimming, and they took a lot of time to try and think of, okay, what can we do to train up officers to lead these new men? And so the Navy landed on the V12 program, which actually combined a couple already existing officers training programs. The Army started something different. Interestingly enough, and this is detailed in the book, the Army decided not to let their officer trainees take part in college athletics. The Navy decided that it would be a good thing, sort of a side gig for these guys, and to keep them interested while they were on campus. And And that played a huge part in, that decision played a huge part for Purdue, because it was because of President Elliott and all of his work with on the national scene with national politics and Army preparedness or military preparedness. Purdue was a major benefactor of the V12 program. Also had the Army training program on campus. A lot of schools did not get a V12 program, but we're tied with the Army, and almost 200 schools canceled football during the 43 season just because they couldn't sustain it on campus. And you say, Alan, you're right. It's hard to draw, a real comparison, but that was the last time major college football had that type of a disruption. And ran across a ton of that during my research, and so many articles of the modern day that referenced the 43 season and going back further, World War I and the 1918 season. So it was really eye-opening. I learned a ton of stuff researching this book, including about the military, and I hope I'm able to bring that across. And the other thing that the war played a part in was a lot of these colleges that were getting these military training programs maybe would not have survived without it, because college age men were going off to war, and a lot of colleges would have probably shut their doors if not for these programs.
Yeah, interesting sidelight and interesting parallel even to today's world, again, to what some of the universities went through in the first year or two of COVID. This Tony Butkovich is an amazing character, All-American at Illinois, and came to Purdue, as did Alex Agassi, who ended up going back to Illinois, I believe, after Purdue's time, and ended up being the head football coach at Purdue from 1973 to 76, and led Purdue to two of its biggest upsets in its history. But the Tony Butkovich story is an amazing one, not only from his field exploits, but I love your detail of what it took to get him the record. And of course, he set the Big Ten record with 13 touchdowns that season. But that attention to detail, and the fact that head coach Elmer Burnham had taken a 1-18 the year before, got hired back. Obviously, things were different in terms of coaching contracts in those days, and has one of the great seasons in the history of Purdue football. But talk about Butkovich just and what he meant, and his persona, and that not only his skill on the field, but what he meant from a leadership standpoint too, from what you could gather.
For sure. The more I learned about Tony, the more enthralled I became by him and the type of person he was. His story, he from a tiny town in central Illinois, just outside of Peoria, called St. David, Illinois, was by most accounts, had major league talent on the baseball diamond. Probably would have, if he'd have chosen that field, that sport, he would have, who knows where that would have ended up for him. Thought about going to Bradley to play baseball, ended up at Illinois to play football, also wrestled for the Fighting Illini, played baseball there as well. And, it, like a lot of men his age, when the war broke out, there was no question what he was going to do. He was going to join some facet of the military. The Marines was the arm he wanted to go into, and that's what eventually brought him to Purdue. I love the story of the Wisconsin game where he got the record. Just when you think about, he scored 13 touchdowns in 4 Big Ten games is mind-boggling. He had 16 total on the year in just 7 contests, because here another spoiler alert, not really. He missed the last 2 games because they were called to active duty, and so they played that final game. He got his record on literally his final collegiate carry. And 2 days later, he was shipped off to Parris Island, South Carolina, to get ready to go fight the Japanese. And it's just an unbelievable story. My favorite game, actually, from the year was when they played Illinois, and 13 Boilermakers were playing their former team. Tony had one of the all-time great performances in Purdue history that day, over 200 yards on 12 carries. 4 scores. And I've got the game film. Alan, you introduced me as the head of broadcasting. My video is my main thing. I've got the game film from that game, and you can see in the fourth quarter, several Purdue players were hanging out over on the Illinois sideline.
Yeah.
Surrounded by former teammates and buddies, and Tony, he walked over to say hello, but then he walked back to the Purdue sideline because it didn't feel right. The Fighting Illini got a little too close for comfort, and Coach Burnham put the starters back in. Agassi and John Guinness and Mike Cassav had to leave the sideline and go back onto the field. But yeah, it's such a cool story that you can see them on the film, over there with their former buddies. It just tells you how close all of these guys were, and the games are games, but they all they had a bond that was more than that.
Yeah, no question. And the story of Tony Butkovich is a story throughout, and is worth just because of it's a war story, and we'll leave it at that. But it is something that hard for those of us. I'll speak for myself. Hard for me to imagine, having been in the service, be able to make that sacrifice, go to school, knowing full well. I mean, you go to the Wisconsin game, which was what a 32-0. He not only does, I think Butkovich has 2 drop kicks that he misses, as I recall in the story. Then he ends up getting the touchdown in kind of a fortuitous timing thing where Purdue gets the ball back and he scores again. But then to think that on Monday he plays Saturday, and on Monday all those guys, I don't know if all of them did, but most of them were shipped out. I mean, I don't know. I'll speak again for myself. If I had that on my brain, knowing I was headed off to training and knowing full well that you're likely headed to some level of duty, that would be an amazing thing. And yet this group was able to have that mental fortitude to hold it together, not only on the gridiron, but to also serve their country.
Totally agree. And you put yourself in Coach Burnham's shoes. He's in his second year as the head man of this team, and he's got something historic going on. And he knows that he's about to lose a third of his roster. And yet when time comes for the week leading up to Wisconsin, he tells the men who are about to ship out, go home, see your families. You're on furlough. Meet me in Chicago Friday night. We'll go to Wisconsin as a team. I don't need to see you until then. And again, that man got it. He understood what was important, and that we all love football, but there's so many more things that have value, and Burnham really understood it. Unfortunately for Purdue, he understood it to the point where we lost him because of that. But just that decision that he made, and they scattered, to the 4 corners and met back in Chicago, and then, like you said, went to Madison and made history. So
a late train, no less. And I think they had to dress on the train, and getting to Camp Randall Stadium in front of what it was at 10,000 fans. Wisconsin was not having a very good season. And again, the crowds were down just because it was such a state of flux at that point in time. So much going on in the world. But still, they were able to gather together and shut out the Badgers, I believe it was that day. Now, the last couple of games really was an amazing part, because Purdue, and I wasn't there, even though some people might think I'm old enough to have been there. They had to limp their way to this, to it. I mean, to be able to gather together to win those final 2 games. Tell me a little bit about some of that storyline as a preview to the book, in terms of what that meant, and beating Indiana. They did not play Indiana last game, but they did play Indiana last game, but they were able to get that together and get that undefeated season.
It was really tough because not only did they lose a third of their roster, a third of their travel party, they were scheduled to be at Minnesota the next Saturday. So, this was the day of meet at the Big Four station and the train to Minneapolis through Chicago. So it's not a quick trip. I don't think it's ever a quick trip to Minneapolis, but so they had about a day and a half, maybe 2 days to get ready for the Gophers. Went up there. The Gophers were down quite a bit too. They lost Bill Daly, their best player, to transfers also. But it was a touchdown pass in the final minute. Sam Vacani was still on the team. I believe he hit in that game, Babe Demanchev for the game-winning score in the beginnings of a blizzard that ended up shutting down the Twin Cities for a couple days. We got out of town just ahead of the heavy stuff. And then Purdue was scheduled to play Michigan State the next week. And Michigan State was one of those teams that they were not in the Big Ten yet. They were still an independent, but they had canceled their season. So the Boilermakers tried to get somebody to fill that date, could not. So Purdue had a week off before the bucket game, had to go down to Bloomington. And Indiana was interesting because they were a civilian team. And whereas that was kind of a drawback for the first half of the year, they didn't lose a single man to active duty. There was a lot of talent on that Hoosier squad, a couple of future pros, and that was a battle. That was an absolute battle. The Boilermakers got a touchdown late in the second quarter, and that was enough because the defense shut the Hoosiers out inside the 10-yard line 4 separate times in the second half, including making a stop in the final minute at literally the 1-foot line. On the last play of the game, just to add some drama, Purdue had the ball back after IU turned it over on downs, and Vacanti does a quarterback sneak. Not sure the motivation, but an Indiana linebacker takes a swing at him, knocks him out cold. Sam Vacanti, the Purdue quarterback's laying on the frozen turf, knocked out, and but he held onto the ball. So the Boilermakers got the win in the bucket and clinched a share of the Big Ten title. And I have not been stumping too hard for this, but closed out the only undefeated season in the country that year. Because Notre Dame actually ended up losing their final game to a team Purdue had beaten to start the season. So the Irish were named the national champs anyway, because college football is a tricky thing. And the Boilermakers ended up finishing 5th. They actually were 2nd in the country after the win at Wisconsin, and fell back a couple spots when they didn't play the next week, and then fell back another spot in the final AP poll to finish 5th somehow.
Somehow, and Notre Dame ruled. That was the early, the Newt Rockne effect, certainly in the history of college football, was still a big part, even though Newt had passed by that point. But the effect of Notre Dame was just, if they were anywhere close, it always seemed like they would get the nod from that standpoint. All right, tell our viewers how you can get the book. And then also, and then I want to ask you also, because some of your other projects that you might think about, if you were going to write books, and I've talked about the Ross 8 Stadium, but what else you have going on?
Sure. The book is available right now on Amazon.
And I'm showing it right here.
There it is, right there.
And we'll put it up in a graphic as well. Go ahead.
Yep, it's available on Amazon. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle if that's what you prefer. Just go to Amazon, search Perfect Warriors, and it'll come up. I've got a deal with the University Bookstore here in town. They're going to be carrying it. I've got a shipment I need to drop off today to get it on their shelves. Trying to get it in some other local retailers here in the Lafayette area as well. But no matter where you're at in the world, you can get it on Amazon right now. Perfect Warriors in the search box.
And any signings signed up with our friends at University Book? Are you still with some? And make sure you let us know, because we'll also put that on our website. But anything already scheduled at this point?
Definitely not scheduled yet, but we've talked about it. They want to wait until a high traffic time, which makes perfect sense come football season. So we will definitely be looking at a football game later this fall, which feels like it's forever away when we're about to have a snowstorm. But yes, there will be a signing there. I've talked with our friend Tom Schott and the folks with the Purdue memorabilia to try and maybe get a table at the next sports trade show that they've got coming up, I think at the end of April. So I'll let you know.
And those
definitely get the word out.
Those have been quite successful and a lot of fun for folks. And it's just a good read. It's a great story. One that hasn't been told a lot. People know about that season, but they don't know what all went into it and the special part of it. So, and lastly, so other things other projects, because of your interest in Purdue sports history. What else are you thinking about? What might be on the back burner for Cory Palm down the road?
Yes, it's on the back burner for now, but my publisher wants me to move it to the front pretty quickly. 2024 is the 100th anniversary of Ross 8 Stadium, and so I've I've pitched and had a proposal accepted to do a 100 years, 100 games, the best 100 games in Ross State history.
Oh, good.
Working on that. That'll be a lot of fun. It's been a ton of fun to pick through. And they're going to be really quick reads. It's going to be, 400 or 500 words, a page or two on, the 100 most important games. I don't rank them. I'm not going to rank them. That would be an exercise in futility. I've had some folks say that's how you get more interest. People get angry. I'm like, well, I don't want to make people angry. This needs to be fun. It's a daunting thing to try and rank 100 of anything. But that's coming out. 2024 will be the date on that, and then probably next down the road from there is maybe a Mackey Arena anniversary coming up as well. 60 years at the end of, as we approach the end of the decade, but that's pretty far away. Haven't put a lot of time into that. It's been Perfect Warriors and Ross State that have taken a lot of time. So.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. And that list could change. I would think September 1st, 2022 might be one of that list from Purdue plays Penn State to open the season. But I do know that 2018 Purdue Ohio State, and I'm going to guess 2021 Purdue Michigan State, and the Boilermakers win over the 5th ranked Spartans will be on your list. So yes, Cory, always a pleasure, and I appreciate your work, and it is an excellent book, well documented, interesting read, some things that I certainly didn't know reading into it, and that's a good thing. So thanks so much for taking the time to join us today, and we'll look forward to talking further. We'll probably have you on again in the fall when we start to talk not only signings, but we only got about a third of the way through the content of this book at best. So thanks so much, Cory, for your time. And I want to thank our sponsors, XXX on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929, Hilton Garden Inn, which tomorrow's a big day, stay at HDI tonight. And of course, State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com. We appreciate also Gordon Jackson, the good folks at WLFI for putting this show on. If you missed part of it, the segments Cory will be on from now till the end of time. That's the good thing of the internet, but the replay will be posted on our site, also available on YouTube and WLFI.com. So have a great rest of your Friday. We'll have a big weekend of Purdue basketball upcoming, and next week we'll be on for Gold and Black Live, probably talking a little Purdue Indiana men's basketball and other things as the Boilermakers get ready for senior day. So have a great week, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you down the road next week on Gold and Black Live.